Good evening, everybody. This is Dr. Sherry L. Jackson with the Preachers Academy, joining in tonight in our third installment of our 4-week session of Ancient Women of Color in the Bible. This is our third week. Tonight we are talking about the Samaritan woman. So, welcome, everybody. Welcome to those who are coming TikTok, those who are coming by Facebook, those who are coming by YouTube. Good evening. This is Dr. Sherry L. Jackson with the Preachers Academy, also in conjunction with Hillman Top University's Women's Studies Department, Black History Department, and also Women's Studies. So welcome tonight to this session. I am so excited tonight. We are in our the first session. We talked about Zipporah, the wife of Moses, and we discovered that Moses would not have been anything without women in his life, especially his wife, Zipporah. Then last week we talked about the Queen of Sheba, a wealthy woman who had her own mind. She was a thinking woman. She was a strategist. She was a diplomat. She was a ruler. And so tonight we are going to talk about the Samaritan woman. We're going to talk about the Samaritan woman tonight. And no doubt that you may call her the Samaritan woman, you may call her the woman at the well, but this is the same woman who is found in John chapter 4. John chapter 4. So I pray that you have done your reading for tonight, because we're not going to go verse by verse, but we're going to look at some big pictures. We're going to look at some big picture things about this woman, who she was, why she was, and her encounter with Jesus, and how that encounter changed her life. But before we do that, I just need to set the room. I need to set the room to make sure that we are all on the same page. If this is your first time joining me, this session is brought to you by the Preachers Academy, And if you are joining me by TikTok, this is a part of the Hillman Top University's Women's Department, Black History Department, um, Religious Study Department, as we are joining together to bring you this intensive session. Let me just tell you a little bit about the Preachers Academy, just in case you have not heard of it before. Please do not get thrown off by the word preacher. It is for all hers. It center hers, right? It centers women, but certainly all are invited. So the Preachers Academy, the goal is to empower and inspire Black women through transformative courses that provide clarity for their calling, credence to their voices, confidence to their core, transcending negative effects of unhealthy and harmful theology, to embrace unapologetically their God-given potential. So at the Preachers Academy, our goal is to help women, and particularly Black women, to overcome this unhealthy and toxic and harmful theology that says that we are less than, right? That we are less than. And so through the Preachers Academy, what we want to do is say that you matter, that what you have to say matter. And through these sessions, through these ancient women of color, I want you to see yourself as God sees you. So who am I? Who am I? Again, welcome to everyone who has come in the room. Again, I am Dr. Sherry L. Jackson, the Chief Executive Officer, Chief Academic Officer of the Preachers Academy. I My work centers around as a womanist theologian, as a womanist preacher, as a womanist scholars, to help again Black women to see themselves as God sees them. And so my work centers around helping to navigate harmful theology and to navigate patriarchal systems and practices that seek to keep us in a particular place. And so why are we here now? Why are we here in this session? We are here because number one is Black History Month. Number two, because we need to see ourselves in the biblical text. Black women have been around since day one. If you read any of the Bible, and if you started with Genesis, and certainly when you get to Exodus, you know that it all started in Africa. It all started in Africa. So that's why we are here. And so tonight I want us to begin. Welcome to everybody who has come into the space. Please leave your comments, your questions that you may have in the chat, in the comment section, and I'm going to try to get them as I see them, and also to for you to engage among yourselves, because remember, learning takes place not just from the instructor standing in front of you, but also from you engaging with each other, So tonight, there are some things that we need to know, and I'm not going to read this biblical text, and hopefully you've read John 4 that talks about the woman who has an encounter with Jesus. She has an encounter with Jesus while she was at the well. Now, if you were with us when we began week one with Sephora, you understand the significance of the well, that lots of things took place at the well. It was a gathering place, and it was a place where women often were the ones who drew the water, right? That's how Moses met Sephora, because she was with her sisters drawing water at the well. And so it is that we have Jesus meeting another woman at the well, right? So there are some things that we need to know that makes this story so significant, is that I just want to read a little bit about it. I'm not going to read all of it, but I just want to set the tone for us tonight. I want to set the tone for us tonight, starting with John 4, verse 4. And I'm reading from the Common English Bible. That said that Jesus had to go through Samaria. He came to a Samaritan city called Sychar, which was near the land that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there. Jesus was tired from his journey, so he sat down at the well. It was about noon. A Samaritan woman came to the well to draw water. Jesus said to her, "Give me some water to drink." His disciples had gone into the city to buy them some food. The Samaritan woman asked, "Why do you, a Jewish man, ask for something to drink from me, a Samaritan woman?" Jews and Samaritans didn't associate with each other. Jesus responded, "If you recognize God's gift and who is saying to you, 'Give me some water to drink,' you would ask him, and he will give you living water. The woman said to him, Sir, you don't have a bucket and the well is deep. Where would you get this living water? You are greater than our father Jacob. You aren't greater than our father Jacob, are you? He gave this well to us, and he drank from it himself, as did his sons and his livestock. Jesus answered, Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks from this water that I will give will never be thirsty again. The water that I give will become in those who drink it a spring of water that bubbles up into eternal life. Verse 15. The woman said to him, Sir, give me this water so I will never be thirsty again and will never need to come here to draw water. Jesus said to her, Go get your husbands and come back. The woman replied, I have no husband. You are right to say, I don't have a husband, Jesus answered. You've had 5 husbands, and the man you are with now isn't your husband. You've spoken the truth. The woman said, Sir, I see that you are a prophet. Our ancestors worship on this mountain, but you and your people say that it is necessary to worship in Jerusalem. Jesus said to her, Believe me, woman, the time is coming when you and your people will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You and your people will worship what you don't know. We worship what we know because salvation is from the Jews. But the time is coming and is here when true worshipers will worship in spirit and in truth. The Father looks for those who worship him this way. God is spirit, and it is necessary to worship God in spirit and in truth. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to stop there with the reading. And so let's just take a look at this story. Let's take a look at this story. And there are some things that I want us to know about this woman. There are some things that I want us to know about this woman. The first thing I want us to know about this woman is that she was an outsider in many ways. She was an outsider of many ways. She is at this well, right? She is there to draw water, and a man comes along. Number one, he comes along and he stays there and he talks to her. And he talks to her, a woman who is a Samaritan woman. See, this woman is an outsider. She sits at the intersection of being a woman, a Samaritan, and a poor woman, right? So she's at the intersection of race, gender, and class. So she is an outsider. She's a part of a mixed race group of people, the Samaritans, which the Jews despise for their ethnic and religious differences. Now, as we are going through this, I want us to see how much this mirrors our lives, and specifically Black women's lives, especially when you sit at the intersection of being Black, being a woman, and being not rich, right? Being not rich. You got a triple whammy against you, right? And so Jesus stops and talks to an outsider. All the decks are stacked against her as a woman, as a mixed race woman, and as a woman. She's already in it defines her class. So she's a woman in a patriarchal society. What do I mean by patriarchal? In a society that is male dominated. So she's outsider racially, She's an outsider socially, and she's an outsider economically. Yet, Jesus stops and talks to her. This story highlights how God values and elevates those marginalized by society. You see, by every account, she was a nobody, but she was she's a Samaritan, and Jesus stops to talk to her. So this shows us that God values and elevates those who are marginalized by society. Society says this about you: as a Black woman, right? But God says, God values and elevates. And we're going to see this in her story. We're going to see this in her story. And I've read it to you tonight. Another thing that we need to take note of about this woman is that, and she had a complicated past. She had a complicated past. Now, many people get stuck right here. They get stuck right here, and I want us to spend some time with this tonight. I want us to spend some time with this because what we see as a complicated past, we have already passed judgment on her. The text says that she was married 5 times, and the man she was living with was not her husband. Now, I want us to consider why she must have had 5 husbands, right? I want us to consider why she had 5 husbands, because we may see something on the outside and say, oh, well, this is bad, or we will pass judgment, or we will shun, right? Without knowing the whole story, Yes, God does say something else about it. We can pass judgment on a person without knowing their full story, right? So I want us to consider culturally and historically why she might have had 5 husbands. The fact that she has had 5 husbands and the one that she was with was not her husband, this has caused much debate. But I want us to consider why this must have been. Number one, she could have been tied into what they call a Levirate marriage. That's Levirate, Levirate marriage and widowhood. So what does this mean? So in ancient Jewish and Samaritan societies, if a woman's husband died, her brother was expected to marry her. Her brother was expected to marry her, right? That's in Deuteronomy 25, 5 through 10, right? So if she was widowed multiple times, she could have had several husbands through no fault of her own. So perhaps you've heard of the story of Tamar in Genesis 38, where she marries, she does not have children. Her husband dies. She does not have children. And so that means that the brother was obligated to marry her. And the second brother who married her died. And the third one who was promised who the daddy Judah promised would marry her, did not marry her. So perhaps this is this woman's case also, that she was widowed, and she had a levirate marriage, right? The man she was living with may not have been a legal husband, perhaps due to financial situation or society constraints, right? So I'm going over these because I want us to understand that everything is not just as it appears. Number two, the second reason that she may have had multiple husbands is due to divorce laws and male authority. Due to divorce laws and male authority. We need to understand that women could not easily divorce their husbands. A woman could not make up in her own mind, could not decide to divorce her husband. Men could divorce the woman for almost anything, according to Deuteronomy 24, 1 through 4. But the woman could not initiate a divorce. That is why the scriptures talk about not to divorce, because they were divorced for anything. If they did not like what she cooked, if she burned the food, if she gained too much weight. And that's why I said don't divorce to marry another, right? Don't put one away to marry another, because this is what they were doing for not any good reason. So she may have been divorced against her will multiple times, leaving her vulnerable and stigmatized. Another reason that she may have been divorced is social and economic. She may have married multiple times, is social and economic survival. In patriarchal societies, women needed marriage for security and survival. So her very life depended on her having a husband. Now we know that that's not the case today in general, right? She did not have children. If she was unable to have children, a husband might have divorced her, forcing her to remarry just to be able to live, right? So I'm going over these things because I want us to understand that we don't always know the whole story before we put our mouth on somebody's situation. So the man she may have been living with may have been out of necessity rather than romance. Love had nothing to do with it. It was strictly so that she could live and survive. That she could live and survive. Another thing that may have been a reason why she had multiple partners is religious and ethnic tensions. Samaritans were ethnically mixed and had different religious beliefs than Jews, leading to social divisions and discrimination. If her marriage involved inter-ethnic or religious conflict, she may have been abandoned or moved between husbands due to social pressure. So this is just 5 reasons why she may have had multiple partners or multiple situations, right? It wasn't because she had no morals or she was just loose. So we need to really be careful how we put our spin on people's situations because we don't know the totality of why she was in this situation. So it wasn't about a personal sin. The Samaritan woman was likely a victim of a broken system, widowhood, divorce, and economic hardship. So yes, she had a complicated past. She had been married multiple times, but this is what we need to understand, that Jesus did not condemn her or shame her. He engaged in deep theological conversation with her. And so this part of her story shows that your past does not define your future. That your past does not define your future, and that God's grace is available to all. That God's grace is available to all. Welcome to everybody who is coming into this space. Tonight we are in our third session of our 4-week intensive about ancient women of color in the Bible. And tonight we are looking at the Samaritan woman, also known as the woman at the well. So what else can we learn about this woman? Or do we know about this woman? That even with her complicated past, that she engaged in one of the longest recorded conversations with Jesus. There were other religious leaders who we may have deemed to be more appropriate, right, to have had these deep theological conversations with Jesus, but it wasn't. It was this woman. Many religious leaders had short, surface level interactions with Jesus, but the Samaritan woman had a profound and extended dialogue. She wasn't afraid to ask bold questions. She wasn't afraid to ask bold questions. And I like to make sure that I push the fact that it is okay. She did not take what Jesus had to say and not have questions. And we are shamed or told that we cannot ask questions of the pastor, or we can't ask questions of each other, that whatever somebody tells us, we're supposed to just take it. But she had questions and she asked Jesus. And because she asked Jesus questions, Jesus took the time to interact with her. And because of that, she received personal revelation from the one who had the answer about worship, about salvation, and about the nature of God. So her story shows that women, especially the marginalized, are worthy of theological engagement and divine insights. That we cannot contain, that this thing is not just for a few, but it is available to all. Ask your questions. Please do not let anybody tell you that you cannot ask questions. That's real big for me. The next thing we need to know about this woman is that after she was one of the first evangelists. This woman with 5 husbands, was the first evangelist. After she had encountered Jesus, she ran to tell her community. So what is evangelizing, so to speak? What is preaching? What is spreading the good news? But telling others about Jesus. And she runs to tell her community. And who is her community? Other Samaritans. Her story, her testimony. Now, I was telling somebody the other day that your testimony is the most effective weapon you have to telling others about Jesus. You might can't quote all the scriptures. You might can't don't know all the theological terms, but you have your testimony. It is her testimony. Come see a man, is what she said, that told all about me. Her testimony led Samaritans to believe in Jesus, making her one of the first recorded. She's even before Mary Magdalene. She is pre-resurrection, right? She's pre-Easter Sunday morning. Mary Magdalene is the first to tell of the risen Savior, but this woman is the first one. And so her story challenges the idea that women are not called to preach or to lead in spiritual matters. I hope this is making sense to us tonight. I hope that this is bringing to light how this marginalized woman, this woman who had a complicated past, has an encounter. Her life is transformed. Jesus does not condemn her. Jesus does not judge her. In fact, when he says that the one that you're with is not your husband, he does not dwell there. He moves on because he knows that her past does not dictate her future. He knows that her past does not dictate her future. We also need to know about this woman that Jesus affirmed that worship is about spirit and not location. That worship is not about a place more than it is about an attitude. It is not about a place. It is about a state of being, a mindset. So the woman asked the question about the proper place to worship, because the Jews' worship place was in Jerusalem and the Samaritans was Mount Gershom. And so they wanted to know, well, which is the proper place? And Jesus responded by saying, that don't even matter. Place does not matter. What does matter is that those who worship must have the right attitude, must have the right state of being, must have the right mindset, and they must worship in truth. So this emphasizes that God's presence is not limited by race, by gender, by location. But it does say that God's grace is available and accessible to all. That you cannot put God in a box. And to say that God only works with this kind of person, and if you are this kind, then you have no place. This story, through this Samaritan woman, through this ancient woman of color, emphasizes that God's presence is not limited by race, by class, by gender, by location, by any of those things. But faith is accessible to all people. So, what can the Samaritan woman teach us? What is it that this ancient woman can teach us in the 21st century? I think tonight that we find ourselves in the same predicament that this woman, this ancient woman, this Samaritan woman found herself. And her story teaches us that God sees and values marginalized women, women who are on the outside, women who are on the periphery of society. This Samaritan woman was discriminated against due to her race, her gender, her social status, her economics, similar to how Black women face systemic exclusion. But Jesus engages with her, showing that God uplifts and that God signifies those, or God shows value, or God uplifts those whose society disregards. Whose society disregards. Another thing that we can learn from this ancient woman, this Samaritan woman, is that your past does not cancel out your purpose. Your past does not cancel your purpose. Your past does not cancel your purpose. Her complicated relationship history did not stop Jesus from using her. Once he heard that, she had this, she had had multiple partners or relationships, he didn't counsel her and say, okay, then you can't do that. You can't be used. Unlike many times what we do. Black women often face judgment based upon their past. But God sees their potential, not just their history. I need to say that again. That Black women, we often face judgment and are shamed because of our past or because of things that we've done. People want to cancel us out. But God doesn't look at your past. God sees your potential, even while you may be in your complicated situation. This is what this ancient woman shows us today. She also shows us that Black women have a rightful place in theology and leadership. That this Samaritan woman had a deep and intellectual conversation with Jesus, proving that women are worthy of theological discussion and spiritual authority. This story shows us how Black women in faith communities deserve to be heard, respected, and empowered as spiritual leaders. And I want to suggest tonight that even as Black women are the most educated in this country for sure, when it comes to theological education, we are top notch. But many people dismiss what we have to say because of our gender and our race or social standing. But we see that through this story, that doesn't have to be that doesn't have to be the case. What else can we learn from her? Is that Black women are powerful evangelists and change makers. That after meeting Jesus, that this Samaritan woman, this one woman, this one marginalized woman, changes her whole community through her testimony. Through what it is that Jesus had done for her, she went and told others. And so what this shows, this aligns with how Black women have historically been the backbones of churches and social movements and cultural change. We even see that today. Even though we weren't listened to, Black women in particular have always been on the forefront of looking our churches. 75% or more will be women. That means we will be the more in attendance. We will be the more who give financially. The social movement, this past election, it was Black women who led the charge. And this did not just start. This has been ongoing. And finally, what she teaches us that we can connect with is that true worship and connection with God, they are not limited by race or status. That Jesus told her that worship is about spirit and truth and not about gender, race, or tradition. This affirms that Black women's faith is just as powerful and legitimate, regardless of what society may say about us. So here are my final thoughts. Here are my final thoughts about this tonight. That the Samaritan woman story is a testament to God's radical love, inclusion, and empowerment of women, especially those whom society tries to silence. This woman reminds Black women that God sees them, that God values their voice, and calls them to lead, to preach, and to transform their communities. That's all I have tonight from this third installment of our 4-week intensive of ancient women of color. My prayer is that you see yourself in these women and that you remember who you are. That's all I have. May all be well with your night. Until we meet next week, we'll go back to our Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, where we will end on the Samaritan woman. Good night.